Monday morning quarterback Albert Breer wrote this. Well, I'd heard Lance was a little annoyed in the immediate aftermath of the Garoppolo restructuring. He's a smart and mature kid who I believe can handle it. Truth is, if he couldn't, you might have bigger questions about where the 49ers are at the position. There you go. So, quote unquote, a little annoyed.
A little more explosive. A little more explosive.
A little more, yeah, that's more direct.
I think it is completely understandable that if someone makes the team, right, Mitch Trubisky can't be a little annoyed if they had named Kenny Pickett the starter, right? Every day in practice, they were around each other in the meeting rooms. Garoppolo threw to two people that look like you and me and then ate lunch and went home. Trey showed up, worked out, practiced, meeting rooms, greasy, Kyle, and Jimmy Garoppolo was nowhere to be found. So I think when this got broached to him, which clearly happened a day or two before the news broke, that they realized it might be a possibility, I completely understand in Trey's shoes the notion of like, what? I thought we were going to cut him. I thought he was not going to be here anymore. I completely understand that. I actually think it's a very normal reaction given the circumstances, right? Like he was not in the meeting rooms or at practice. I think it would have been like if he was at practice and that we'd be like, ooh, might be a little something there. But they hadn't even been hanging out or around each other, right?
Yes. I'm just going to follow it up with Breer then tweeted, full disclosure, my wording might have been a little presumptive. I'm not climbing the guy's head. What I heard was it was complicated news to take, as you'd expect it would be. And again, that was just in the immediate aftermath. He'll be fine. First of all,
so the Niners didn't love his wording, right?
Niners didn't love his wording. I'm sure Don Yee didn't love his wording. But first of all, I love the idea of this being immediate aftermath. But what I'd heard was it was complicated news to take. There's no other way to interpret that than as he wrote it the first time, which to your point is fine. No one ever says, John, how did you react to the news? You go, well, it's complicated. And I'm like, well, John's thrilled about it. No, that's not. So whatever words you want to use, maybe he made up his word because somebody said, oh, it was a little complicated. And then he said, well, I'll interpret that as a little annoyed. Whatever it was, of course, whatever it was.
He's a human being. Yes. I was thinking this morning, I was getting a little sweating out the Tito's. That's still a lot in there. And one narrative that's going to come up is like, this Jimmy Trey is just a created outside noise. Like, let's not get this twisted. The Niners created the situation. The fans, us, everyone that talks about it, that is not inside the building on the team, it is completely fair to constantly talk about it, I think. Unless Trey is just killing it and be like, well, okay, he's clearly the backup. But when any interception, anytime a game gets weird, anytime he loses, they created the situation. I understand from a value standpoint, made complete sense. But as the season goes on, when guys are calling their games, the Tiricos and the Collinsworths and the Joe Bucks, and it's going to come up that like, the Niners are big on this is just the fans talking about it. Well, yeah, because you guys signed up for this situation. It would not be talkable if it was just like Purdy and Sudfeld. It would not, no one would take it seriously. I'm not saying it wouldn't get talked about because fans are humans and fucking people get pissed off when you throw a couple picks and you lose a game. I know I do just as much as the next guy. But it's a lot different in this situation. And to me, no matter how this thing transpired, if it does get a little weird, the first and foremost people, the blame is the wrong way to put it, but that created this potential ecosystem is the team. Starting with Kyle and John doing it. I don't blame Jimmy. Like I've said over and over, he was not getting $6.5 million from anywhere else. So I put in a vacuum this decision from just a black and white standpoint this was the most money he could get, or at least guarantee he could get. Like maybe with incentive somewhere else. If
at least at a place where he knew if he had to play, he could succeed. Right, going to Seattle for a little more money, I wouldn't have.
But I don't think he could have got more money there. I could have seen them being like, "Hey, we'll give you like $3 or $4 million and $500,000 bonus for every start." And what if he only started 5 or 6 games? You just never know. Like
guys take less money to start places. I would also have advised him not to do that, not to go to Seattle. Right. So whatever the circumstance is, to your point, if it is indeed the most money, it's also probably one of the better situations.
But he didn't come back for $2 million. Like 6.5 is still. I would imagine he's one of the higher paid backups in the league, right?
Well, I think the highest, if you don't count Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I don't think you can, right? It's not a true. Yeah, okay, yeah. Sam, because they got 2 guys making $19 million.
Yeah.
Most guys make, I mean, Mariota's in the world and Mitch's all make like 2.5.
Colt McCoy, here's what the Niners want us to, a few things the Niners want out there, right? And we'll find out if they believe it or not. They want us to believe that they think Trey's good enough for this not to be an issue. They want to believe that Trey's mentally strong enough for it to not create worse play, because that's a fair question. If Trey doesn't play well, did you create this by having Jimmy around? Did you create some instability in Trey's mind? Did you undermine his leadership, right? All that. They want us to believe that they believe in him a lot. Like, a few bad games is not going to mean Jimmy Garoppolo time. That the only reason Jimmy Garoppolo is back is because he's just such great value, they couldn't pass it up, right? That's the way they presented it. And maybe it's true. Maybe it's true that they believe in Trey fully. They're not looking for any reasons to replace him with Jimmy, that a few bad games from Trey won't mean Jimmy Garoppolo becomes the quarterback. If at the end of the year, Trey's had some ups, some downs, and throughout the downs, they never wavered. They stuck with Trey the whole time. As everyone else is wondering, I don't know, you guys, you're close to missing the playoffs. You're kind of you're trying up against the wild card race. You should probably go to Jimmy. If they do what they did last year in reverse, which is when everyone's calling for the other guy, sticking with the starter, and it works, then they'll be able to say, see, we told you it was always about Trey. But we have to get there first. And a million other things can happen that are not part of the plan. Their plan is to stick with Trey. But things happen that blow up your plan all the time. Injuries. No one would blame them. Injuries would be a great reason for them to say, see, this is why we did this. If Trey got hurt, now we can play Jimmy, and it's not like going to Purdy or Sudfeld, whatever. Time will tell, but time will have to tell how real they are about all of this. For now, all the talk on the outside, which you can say as much as you want, that we put on blinders, we don't listen to anything outside of the room, blah, blah, blah. We know that's not true, because the second a team is an underdog, they say nobody believed in us. So they know what's being said. And this is an easy one to kind of imagine what's being said. And I think the real question is what happens in that locker room and in those coaching meetings if Trey struggles? What do they do then? And that's the thing that we can all and should, because to bring it full circle back to your point, they created the ability to ask the question, which any responsible coach would be doing their job at every position. Every coach loves to say every position is always under evaluation. Are we doing the right thing, sticking with player A over player B if player A is struggling?
I think it's a different scenario. I'm not saying this apples to apples at all, and they weren't coming off a successful year. But when you do put yourself in a situation, and this guy turns out he's been on multiple teams, Carson Wentz, and people are starting to question, like, is he a weirdo? And when they drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round, it immediately got weird. Again, not apples to apples. I just think when you put yourself in that situation and the guy struggles, and you could argue Carson had more equity. You could argue in a weird way he had like less equity in Trey Lance, because Trey Lance's equity is just like this hope and all the picks. Carson had some high highs, but he also had some low lows. That you just put it out there, and it's a tangible thing to speak about, right? It would have been like when people talked about where was Jimmy going to go if he got cut, and people like, don't discount Miami, because like New York was also a team. Well, everyone thinks Daniel Jones sucks. So it's like if they wanted to bench Daniel Jones 3 weeks in, no one would have cared. The Tua thing would have been a lot different. It's like a couple weeks in, like just go to Jimmy. Well, they had drafted Tua 5th overall, and he's a year younger than Daniel Jones in terms of his time in the league. And it's like, do you even know yet? And you just kind of put this clock on. And I'm not saying those situations parallel this, because these guys know each other. If you watch I didn't watch the entire press conference, but Jimmy's clips, go back to Trey Lance when he was drafted. Remember the Colts, the picture of the Colts draft board, and 2 guys had like the special blue, and I think it was Trey Lance and Devontae Smith were the 2 guys. And they're just known as like, I mean, Devontae Smith was known as the alpha on the Alabama team. I mean, that's just enough said, right? In a unit with when Judy and Ruggs came out and they asked him who was the alpha in the room, he was still going back to school. They said, oh, Devontae. And that's, a team that really values character. So Trey Lance, from a character standpoint, everyone loved him coming out. Jimmy's press conference of the clips about, Kawakami asking him about, basically sucking up his ego, being the backup quarterback, and Jimmy's answers, this is why character matters, and this is at even the highest level. Like, this is kind of crazy. like Jimmy's a pretty even unique character guy, because I think a lot of people, quote unquote, high character players would be like, fuck this. And no one would blame them. Right. I mean, remember when Matt Ryan, the rumors got out, and if you ever heard Matt Ryan's clips before he got traded, he was like, it was the first time I had to kind of look out for myself. I had to realize like I could get cut, I could get traded. Like I had to and Jimmy never really played that game, which is just, I don't know. I mean, I don't think we've seen him play enough. So it's not like he's not quote unquote competitive, but I'd say he's a pretty big outlier in any professional sports, but that's the only reason this has a potential to work, because it would not be possible. Like, let's just say Jimmy.
The other reason would be if Trey were just, an all-star level quarterback right away, right? Even then, if Jimmy were not a great teammate, it would also work potentially in that scenario.
Let's say Jimmy had gotten hurt midseason last year. Trey had taken over, and it was pretty clear he was a stud. They had the same success. They got to the NFC Championship game and lost, but everyone felt like, Trey's going to be a stud. He's going to be one of the next one of that group, that we talk about all the time. Is there any chance Jimmy's back on this team, or they just was at the value rookie contract? We just want to have a backup plan.
In some ways, it would have been easier to bring Jimmy back on the team, right?
Yeah, because there wouldn't be it's like we've already seen it with Trey.
There'd been a competition, and we all saw Trey take his job.
Yeah. But usually, like when
Lamar
did that to Flacco, now Elway gave Flacco some money. Like you usually just pivot.
Yeah. Did Alex leave immediately after Colin took over? He didn't back up the next year. That one was pretty weird.
Only backed up for the half season or whatever.
Josh on the stream says media acts like Jimmy was fucking Herbert. See, I think this is one of the reasons Trey actually has I think Trey Lance has a pretty long leash from Kyle. And I think one of the reasons is that, and I've said this a lot, I think Jimmy bothers Kyle a lot. As much as he sees a lot in Jimmy, there are a lot of things that really frustrate him about the way he has to play with Jimmy. And, I think the Jimmy stuff probably comes from the fact that they've won with him. And that's why Jimmy gets the credit that he gets. But I don't think there are many illusions about Jimmy not being worthy of trying to replace. I think it's became clear that Garoppolo was the level of quarterback that if you can try and upgrade, you should try and upgrade.
I agree. Because he's the worst of the group that we talk about all the time. That's the most polarizing, right? Cousins, Derek, Dak, which those guys are locked in, going nowhere. Tannehill's worse than those guys. But his money, you're kind of stuck. I would say in a weird way, would I rather have Jimmy? I think the stats would say Tannehill, but let's just say Jimmy's the worst of that group.
Tannehill can throw it down the field.
Yeah, it feels like Tannehill's better. He's more talented than Jimmy.